Welcome, friends, to At Home with Theosophy. Today we are starting with a new series that is based on the book by Annie Besant called In the Outer Court. Later editions of this book had different titles, like From the Outer Court into the Inner Sanctorum or things like that. But this is the original title, just in case you find the different editions. So for the next few weeks, we are going to go through the different chapters of the book, through some selection of what we regarded as the main concepts, and discuss them with you as we normally do in the At Home with Theosophy series.
If you can't find the book in physical form, there are some PDFs online that you can at least read and look at. But I'm really glad that we're studying this book. This has to be one of my favorite. And I'm glad that we're studying it because although I love Annie Besant and her writing, sometimes she can just go on and on and on, which I call like a bedtime, which is perfect for a bedtime story. But you really, you have a harder time picking out the points that she's trying to make. So in reading this, it really gave me the opportunity to really pick out the specific points that she's trying to get through. So the first part of tonight's webinar will be actually her description of the up to the outer court and the inner court and the Holy of Holies, which she goes from the inside outside and explains the purpose of the evolutionary path of humanity.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we use the metaphor that we are going to see tonight. We used that metaphor in a previous webinar that Michele and I did. I was on the path of initiation. So that was taken from this book. So today we are going to go through the original writing where the metaphor came from.
The webinar was called The Secret Path.
The Secret Path.
Right.
Was called.
So this kind of gives the whole, she has divisions, which she calls them, and we'll go over, and she has 5 divisions. So we'll find that in the reading. I see a great mountain standing in space, with a road that winds round the mountain, round and round until the summit is reached. As we trace the road upwards along this spiral track, we see how it ends at the summit of the mountain, that it leads to a mighty temple, a temple as of white marble, radiant, which stands there shining out against the ethereal blue. That temple is the goal of the pilgrimage, and they who are in it have finished their course and remain there only for the help of those who still are climbing.
So she's beginning to set up this metaphor of the process of evolution as a journey around the mountain, up a mountain, and the goal is to get to a temple that is at the top of the mountain, and in the innermost part of the temple is where truth is discovered. This temple, in the way she describes it, is based on the Judeo-Christian tradition, or more on the Judaic tradition, a temple that has different parts.
Right. Solomon's temple.
Yes.
And if you Google for photos, if you Google Solomon's temple or up the mountain to the temple, something like that, you'll see a very nice depiction of the temple, which really kind of solidifies as she's explaining things.
Mm-hmm. So you'll see the temple has an outer court that is wide where people gather. Then there is a wall, and there is an inner court where people would go for worship. And then there is the Holy of Holies in the center of the inner court, that only the priests can go inside. It is the most sacred part of the temple where the symbol of the deity is. So she uses this, as we are going to see, for her metaphor.
And what you'll see is, as you notice, a mountain can hold a lot more people than the outer court can. And then from the outer court, it gets smaller of who goes into the inner court. And the same into the sanctum sanctorium in the inner, the Holy of Holies. So, and it seems like it's not so much you get picked to go, into the outer court, and then you get picked to go into the inner court. It's more of a choosing of your own. It's what, and she'll give you, she'll talk about the qualifications of what that is. If we look more closely at the temple, we shall see in the midst of it a Holy of Holies, and round about the center are courts, 4 in number, ringing the Holy of Holies as concentric circles. And outside the temple, there is yet another enclosure, the outer court, and that court has in it many more than are seen within the temple itself.
So we are not going to go into these details in particular. We already explored that in this other webinar, The Secret Path. But she's using these 4 rings that form the inner court as the 4 initiations in the path, what Theosophy is called the path of discipleship. And then the outer court is where people are preparing themselves to enter the temple. So in this webinar, we are going to concentrate on how to get to the outer court, how to prepare ourselves to be at the entrance of the temple.
How it's about being in the outer court, mm-hmm. and what we need to prepare ourselves to get into the inner temple. Right. So at this point, and she'll explain it, we've climbed the mountain and we've gone past the gate into the outer court is where we'll get to eventually.
Which, as Annie Besant says, the outer court is not the temple itself, but it's an entrance to this preparation to get into the temple.
Looking at the temple and the courts and the mountain road that winds below, we see this picture of human evolution. And along that road, round the mountain, stands a vast mass of human beings, climbing indeed, but climbing so slowly, rising step after step. Sometimes it seems as though for every step forward, there is a step backward. And though the trend of the whole mass is upward, it mounts so slowly that the pace is scarcely perceptible. Millions of years pass in the tracing, an endless succession of lives seems to pass. Why is it that they climb so slowly? How is it that these millions of men and women take so long a journey? Looking at them, it seems that they travel so slowly because they see not their goal and understand not the direction in which they are traveling. And as we watch one or another on the pathway, we see that they are always straying aside, attracted hither and thither, and with no purpose in their going. They walk not straight onwards as though intent on business, but wander hither and thither, like children running after a blossom here and chasing a butterfly there.
So she's describing here the evolution that happens pretty much unconsciously, which is a very slow evolution. She's saying most people don't know why they are here in life, not even intellectually, let alone by direct perception. So people find themselves in the world and not knowing why they are here, they just try to enjoy the world and they try to be happy and they try to do the best they can. But in this pursuit of mere superficial happiness, we may not be growing in an understanding of our true nature, of the purpose of being alive, of all this. So she's comparing that to these masses of people that they are climbing. Evolution is proceeding, but because it's absolutely unconscious, it goes ever so slowly. And the fact that we don't inquire into the purpose of life makes us just be wandering from here to there without really advancing.
Right, and this is what we called in the previous webinar the Stop and Smell the Roses path around the mountain. So there is a path and there is a purpose, but it seems that the mass of humanity really doesn't know what that purpose is or why they're, or even that they're really going anywhere, that they're moving so slow. Now the outer court that some of the climbers in front are reaching, that outer court of the temple, seems not only to be gained by the path that winds around and round the hill so often, for as we look at it, we see that from many points in this spiral pathway, the outer court may be reached, and that there are briefer ways that wind not round the hill, but go straight up its side, paths that may be climbed if a traveler's heart be brave and his limbs be strong.
So here, she says, some people are getting to the top of the mountain. We won't go too much into that, but those who begin to realize that there is a purpose in life, then their life begins to be more purposeful. And they try to relate to life not only as a way to get from it, I don't know, some kind of, pleasure or enjoyment, which is, of course, part of life, but it's not the pursuit of pleasure is not the whole of it. So these people would be closer to the outer court because they were walking more decidedly. Now, Annie Besant says, even those people that have to go around the mountain, it's a very tall mountain and it takes a lot of time to get there. Now, there are some shortcuts. You can access the outer court by going up straight up the mountain, leaving the paved path and going up the mountain.
Right. I just want to mention the paved path is the path of religion or philosophy or even non-religion. Whatever it is, it's a paved path that you're on it with a group of other people. And that's very helpful. And I just want to mention that at no point is one stage better than the other. That's just what it is. It is a stage, and we've all been, in the wandering path. We've all been in the religious path, and this is probably where most of us are now, is this path that's still going around the mountain, but we're getting closer to going straight up the mountain.
Yes, the idea, of course, if in climbing, one decides to depart from the path, that going straight up is far more challenging, is more dangerous. We need to be trained for that. A person that is, out of shape cannot really do that. So the idea is that if one wants to go straight up the mountain, one has to undergo a certain training to be able to do it. Now, we will see why would any person try to get up the mountain faster, and we will see what Annie Besant proposes a little later.
The first step is taking off this long spiral road when some soul who has been traveling round and round for millenniums perhaps recognizes for the first time a purpose in the journey and catches for a moment a gleam from the temple on the summit. So this could be called an awakening.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
When the soul has caught these glimpses of its goal and of the director pathway that leads towards it, then it understands that the pathway has a name. That name is service, and those who enter on that shorter pathway must enter it through a gate on which service of man is shining in golden letters. Before the soul can reach even the outer court of the temple, it must pass through that gateway and realize that life is meant for service and not for self-seeking, and that the only way to climb upwards more swiftly is to climb for the sake of those who are lagging, in order that from the temple more effective help may be sent down to the climbers. Now, Annie Besant mentions the word service or serve 47 times in the book. She mentions it 31 times in this first chapter. So it could be inferred that it's a pretty important gateway, as she mentions, to get it. And this is what I kind of was inferring when I talked about it's not to get from gateway to gateway to gateway is not something that you're chosen, but it's something that you yourself or your soul actually chooses to get through.
Mm-hmm. I think this is one of the main differences between general modern spirituality and the Theosophical approach. Normally, in modern times, spirituality is advertised as something that you do so that you can be happier, so that you can get things from it. It's an individual endeavor. You do it because you want to get something from it. And what Theosophy normally proposes is that we are not really separate. The idea that I can gain something for myself is actually an illusion. It's just like being part of a family and thinking that you can be happy if you just concentrate on yourself, and then your husband or wife and your kids are all miserable, and you are a good person. You care about them being miserable. But you think that the way to be happy is to try to make yourself happy. And not until everybody's happy will you be happy. So similarly, it is an illusion that, according to the Theosophical teachings and some others too, like in Mahayana Buddhism, for example, it is an illusion, the idea that we can attain individual happiness or liberation. So Annie Besant says the only reason why you would want to take on a more strenuous path is to get to the temple, because in the temple there are some tools that can help people who are climbing very slowly and that are suffering. The weather is not very nice, and it is a hard journey. It is like this, long journey, the typical traditional journeys through the desert, that are hard to do. So you want to get to the temple because from there you can help. And that is the only way, or that is what will make you get out of the path around the mountain.
And one of the things too is it's like if we're all in the fourth grade and somebody has a more handle or better concept of the ideas of the fourth grade, and they help each other, they can only help each other as far as that fourth grade level is. But if we can get to the top of the mountain and get to high school and come back and help the fourth graders, we have a much better perception of things, and we're able to give a little more general knowledge or wisdom to the problems of fourth grade.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we can only help humanity when we are not part of the problem any longer. Mm-hmm. As long as we are part of the problem, of course, we can help each other in little ways, but essentially we are still part of the problem. So getting to the temple means to transcend the level of where the problem is so that we can help.
These souls who just for a moment recognize that there is a goal and purpose in life begin to climb with more steadfastness than their fellows. Although they are still winding their way around the hill, they begin to practice more steadily the virtues, and they give themselves more persistently to what we recognize as religion, which is trying to tell them how they may climb and how the temple may finally be won. They go to the front of this endless multitude that is climbing along the road. They travel more swiftly up the winding pathway because there is more purpose in their traveling. So she mentions this a couple times in the book too about the purpose or the value of religion in teaching virtues and also teaching what the temple is. So it's like this guidebook. So if we're using the mountain climbing as an analogy, you wouldn't climb a mountain without being physically fit, without knowing the terrain, without having the proper equipment, without knowing what you're going to run into. So that's what religions provide for us. And nowadays, with the more openness of religions and philosophy and even the sciences, we're able to to choose a little more of which way we want, what book we want, what author we want to read about how to get up the mountain.
But this is still part of the going around the mountain. So she so far described these three situations: the going around the mountain unconsciously, very slowly, constantly getting off the path, then going around the mountain with more direction because we recognize that there is a purpose in life, and then this other way that is going straight up the mountain, that what takes you out of the path, which is still more comfortable, is this need to serve, this need to help, and that's what will be the central subject, this kind of path in the book.
And in Theosophy, this is what is called the occult path.
Mm-hmm.
At last, after many lives of striving, many lives of working, growing purer and nobler and wiser, life after life, the soul makes a distinct and clear speaking forth of a will that now has gone strong. This brave soul means to climb that mountain in but a few human lives, breasting the hill at its steepest, the path that will lead it right upwards into the very holy of holies, and it means to do within a space of time that is to be counted by but a few lives, that which the race will take myriads of lives to accomplish. So this would be like trying to complete high school in 2 years or trying to complete college in a short time. It's doable, but how much effort will it take, and what do you have to give up? And if you think about it, what you're really giving up is not pleasure per se, but those distractions and chasing after the comforts and the feeling good of pleasure, and you're really honing in on getting the job done, doing what you want to do.
Mm-hmm. So what we will study in this webinar has a double purpose. On one side, it begins to prepare us, as Annie Besant was saying in the previous slide, to help us develop these virtues, become nobler, realizing the purpose of life, so that we are still in this pilgrimage around the mountain, but then we now are doing it at a good pace. And at some point, which maybe, tomorrow or maybe in another life in the future, it doesn't matter. At some point, they may come that deep compassion and that deep sense that, I have experienced everything in the world. I don't care about the things that the world is offering me. Of course, if you are going to live in the world, you can participate in everything in the world, but the allurement of this is why you are alive is lost, and you begin to recognize that there is suffering in humanity, and that we can do something about it, and that we can help. And then when all this begins to awaken and to become stronger, is when the path or when the person begins to get off the path into this more straight, pathless path, as Michele calls it. So this book serves for those two purposes: to prepare us and also to open up this possibility.
Right. And I just want to mention, sometimes I don't think it's always a conscious choice. Mm-hmm. I think sometimes what happens is we notice that we're walking faster, or we're noticing that we're, up ahead of the crowd that's walking aimlessly, and we're not sure why. It's more of a compulsion inside of us. Until then, eventually we see that glimmering temple, or we see that light, or we meet somebody that we're walking with and they say, hey, oh, this is why I'm walking. And you're like, oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. Yes, normally I would say it's not a conscious choice. It's not that one day one says, hey, I want to go faster and go up the mountain. As Michele is saying, this is a natural maturation, and little by little, all the distractions begin to lose their power on you. And what is left is just that path. It's something that happens naturally.
So the soul knocks at the gateway, and the door swings open to let it through. and it passes into the outer court. Through that court it has to go, traversing it step by step, until it reaches the first of the gateways that lead into the temple itself. The first of those 4 gateways, every one of which is one of the great initiations, beyond the first of which no soul may tread that has not embraced the eternal forevermore, and that has not given up its interest in the mere transitory things that lie around. And she makes a distinction in this. I know we only have it in one quote, but she does make a big distinction between the path of transitory things, or the idea of the transitory things, and choosing what's more eternal.
Mm-hmm. And we cannot go into the concept of what these initiations mean in terms of the Theosophical teachings. That is how Annie Besant is using this word. As we said, we did a whole webinar in the past about this, and you can send us an email. We can see how to access the recordings if you are interested and you have not participated. But the idea here is that this outer court is the preparation for that, and normally people think of all this in a way that is not quite correct, in the sense that, as we talked in the previous webinar, when people think of spiritual achievements, they think of, having this, or powers, or wisdom, or happiness, or and that is not the way to look at this, because what happens is that the training, like in most movies where there is a training before an accomplishment, the training itself may not be pleasant necessarily. The training itself is not going to bring all these imaginary things. The training is a lot of work. And the only reason why a person is willing to go through that training is because of an inspiration that comes beyond our personal ambitions. It's because of this recognition that Annie Besant talks about, that this is the right thing to do. This is something that can address the suffering of humanity. I just do it because I feel that this is what I have to do, not because of what I may imagine I will get from it.
And that personal ambition is something that can get us to step off the paved path and going up to the pathless path. But there comes a point where, because personal ambition can drive us, it can give us strength, it can, help us to fight through when we're like, what is going on? But there will come a point where, we can climb and climb and climb, and then someone says, okay, all this climbing is for no reward. And that's where kind of the wheat is from the chaff, or the chaff, it's separated. And that's the natural separation. If we know, okay, I'm climbing this mountain and putting all this hard work, but I'm not going to get any reward out of it, then all of a sudden I'm going, hey, wait, why am I doing this? And either I'm going to continue on, or I'm going to say, I'm going to get back on this nice smooth path. Mm-hmm. So,
of course, we are talking about this in an allegorical way. Again, it's not that it's a conscious decision, but we will come to situations in life where many times you have to choose whether to face the problems and try to deal with them in the highest way that you can, or you try to face the situation trying to get whatever you want or is nice to you. So the decisions are more in how we face things than a thinking decision.
And the natural path that we talk about, the natural path is actually the path of religion. So that's that paved path around the mountain. The pathless path off of that is actually an artificial path. It's not natural, and it's not something that regular people take, or people take. I don't want to put in categories. But I would say, it's the difference between you and your office mate in there, and somebody comes by and says, hey, I need help, and it doesn't benefit either one of you. what's the difference or why does one person get up and help this other person just for the sake of helping them, and the other person say, hey, no, sorry, it doesn't, it's not going to benefit me any. So.
Yes, the question is that the more, for example, we are learning all this from Annie Besant, and each of us may have learned from many different teachers. And we can learn from them because they have seen that. And then they can come back using the metaphor and tell us about this. And we are greatly helped by this. Now, the regular normal path of evolution with no teachers would take, billions of years. Now, the more people who have seen the truth are there, the more they can come and help the people who are going slowly around. And also because we are all connected, when there is an enlightenment, let's say, in one person, the whole of humanity is enlightened to some degree. So the natural path is the path around the mountain. However, because we are human beings that have the creative power of the divine, we can choose to take a non-natural path so that we can help this whole process to be accomplished in a faster way, simply because going around the mountain it takes effort, produces suffering, it is necessary, but if we can help to alleviate that, that is a great thing to do. So some souls are called to this. I don't know why some souls are and some others may not be. We don't need to judge, as Michele said.
Right. No, I think it's just a maturity. Yeah. It's just like on a team or in a band or in anything. You have those people who are naturals, who, have been doing this for what we say lifetimes. So they have this natural ability. And when you have those in a group, they always tend to lift the others to do their very best. So that's how I look at it, as that. Okay, but the soul whose progress we are tracing is as yet only going to prepare itself in this outer court of the temple, in order that in lives to come it may be able to ascend the 7 steps to the first gateway. What then shall be its work in the outer court? How shall it lead its lives therein, in order that it may become worthy to knock at the temple gate? The divisions of this work I have made are arbitrary. Annie Besant calls them purification, thought control, building of character, spiritual alchemy, and on the threshold.
So this is what we are going to explore in these 5 weeks, these different aspects in which we can start working that eventually will lead us into the temple. And as Annie Besant says, and I think we are going to read a little about this, it's not that one comes after the other. These are 5 aspects of the overall work that we can do.
Right. So it's not you achieve purification and then you go on to thought control and then you go on to building of character. So it's kind of just a concentric, not even concentric, just interlapping circles that everything kind of works on together. These divisions do not mean that each is to be taken separately, because all these things have to be done at one and the same time, and the soul that is spending its lives in the outer court is busy with all this work in all the lives that it spends there. It is not perfect accomplishment of any one of them that the soul must have achieved ere it may reach the gateway of the first initiation. It is only that it must be striving with something of success. It must understand its work and be doing it with diligence. When the work is perfectly accomplished, it will be in the Holy of Holies itself.
This is an important point because normally what we see in Theosophy is a description of the perfect expression of an enlightened consciousness. This is like a description of how a consciousness in which wisdom is awakened works. So when we would see that, and Annie Besant repeats this in a couple of places, we will see that the things that Annie Besant describes may seem to be very far away from us. To have this perfect mastery over our thoughts, so that our thoughts don't go anywhere that we don't want to, etc. We would see all that. And it's not that is expected of us right now. What she's saying is, this is how this works in an enlightened being. And all our work is just to walk in that direction, is to not work with ambition of attaining something, but this we have seen the model, and then we start working on ourselves to start being similar to that model in a sense.
And that's an important distinction, at least for me it is, because I remember Krishnamurti said something about you should always be joyful, even in times of trouble. And I had the hardest time with that. So I thought, well, if I can't even do this one thing, how can I do anything on a spiritual path? But once we understand that what we're given here is the ultimate, is the ideal, it's what we're striving for. And all we're asked to do is get up every day and try again and have that learning mind that wants to do better and serve more. And there we've succeeded if that's what we have in itself.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So it's in this case would be go in the direction of joy, even if joy is not there. Can you work on accepting it a little more, and accepting it even if you still curse against the situation, but inwardly you recognize this is something I have to do, for example. That means walking in that direction, even if joy is not very close.
Know that it's there. You're not there yet, or your emotion isn't there yet, but that it's there, that's the goal. That in itself is a huge step in the right direction. So just Jeanette's Spiritual Alchemy. So it's just talking about, it's an analogy of the alchemist changing lead or something that's impure to something that's pure. So it's taking our unspiritual nature, our lower self, and taking it and changing it into something that's more spiritual.
Yeah, we will see. We will have a whole class about that. So that is the last in the series. We will see that in detail.
Okay, we're going to start on purification. The lower nature must be purified until every part of it vibrates perfectly in harmony with the higher.
Okay, so here you see again the ideal. This is the ideal, that our personality vibrates in perfect harmony with the higher. Now, that is not expected of us right now, is going in that direction. So always remember that. We won't keep coming to this point. But because some people get disappointed or say, well, this is really difficult, but remember that she's going to give us the perfect ideal.
The temporary personality is only the assemblage of qualities and characteristics which the soul gathers round it in the course of each of its many lives. All these garments which the soul carries with it, often life after life, all that which it builds during incarnation must be pure. Life has to be devoted to the single purpose of gathering together material which is useful to the higher one, who lives and grows out of that which the lower gathers. So it's basically about one-pointedness, or what is our goal in life. So if even in our work or our daily, if my goal is to have a clean house, well, every time I take something and throw it on the floor is not reaching towards that goal. So.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and this is something that all spiritual teachers say. This reminds me of Jesus that said, don't gather treasures of the earth, gather treasures of heaven, for example, those things that are eternal. So part of the process of purification, as she calls it, it relates to this, and we are going to see it in more detail, to the idea of what kind of of activities, what kind of thoughts, emotions, aims, goals we engage in. Are they meaningful, for the greater good, for the spiritual aspect of ourselves, or are they only meaningful for the personal and detrimental for the higher? There is nothing wrong in something that is good for the personal as long as that is in harmony with the common good, with the higher. So little by little, our life begins to get into a certain order where the spiritual is our real love, our real aspiration.
Those in the outer court will at least have turned from evil ways. If ever they are found in such ways at all, it will be by a sudden slip immediately retrieved. The soul will have to deal with subtler temptations to intellectual ambition, to be proud of that which it has gathered, and to hold firmly for its own sake to that which it has achieved. The soul will begin to purify its intellectual nature. It will begin to scrutinize the motives that impelled it to effort and the motives which moved it to action, and it will begin carefully to look at itself in the light that is ever coming through the temple windows. So this is basically about starting about right perception. We have to have an ideal to look at. We have to have a perception in order to take us out of what we think is just this path, this pretty flower and this nice, brook over here. And we have to know what there is in order to move towards it. So what she's talking about here is not the path anymore, not going around the mountain and not going up the mountain. Now we're in the outer court, and this is what we're working on now, those subtler temptations.
Mm-hmm. As she says, the process of learning not to do consciously anything that is evil or that harms others, that process of learning is the going around the mountain at a faster pace with a clear, view of the purpose of life and all that. When the soul gets to a point where there is no conscious engaging in something harmful, we still may fall into it. We still may be unable to prevent it, but there is always this thing that says, I cannot do that. I have to, to work on this and all that. That when the soul has that clear intention is when it begins to approach the outer court, let's say. So what Annie Besant says there, the first step is one of self-observation, self-knowledge, beginning to see, why am I doing things? And this is something that we have to work with. What is truth is always our aim. So when I try to see, why am I doing this? Many of my motivations will be self-centered in a way, because this is how we are raised. So I have to be ready to look at the truth there. I have to be ready to recognize there is a personal motivation here, because it is that recognition that begins to generate a maturity in us. If we just, we say, I shouldn't be doing this for selfish purposes, and we just, refuse to look at it, that selfish intention is never going to change. So the first is to begin to examine and be humble. And we share the consciousness of the whole humanity. So inside of us are all the selfish elements. The only difference, if there is any, is that we begin to be willing to face this.
And one of the other things that she's talking about here, it's like I was raised a good Catholic, and because I don't do any of the 10 commandments. So if I stop right there,
you don't break.
I don't break.
Yeah.
I don't break any of the 10 commandments. So thereby, I'm a good Catholic girl. Now, if I stop right there, that's where my religious endeavor stops. But there's all kinds of subtleties within those 10 commandments that can make me become a better person. So that's what we're talking about here, those more subtler temptations, aspects of it. So Deborah asks, does the reference here to the souls mean the personality first?
Yes, in general, she talks about the soul expressing through the personality. So the one that is really doing this journey is the soul, but the soul, because there is identification with the tendencies of the personality, it assumes or it gets engaged in these tendencies, but it's always the soul that is behind. So what we call the personal ego is the soul, but the soul when it is confused, when the soul thinks, I am this personality separate from the rest, and I want everything good for me and not for the others. So the personal ego is the soul, but the soul with ignorance.
Then the soul will realize that the desire nature, which mixes itself with the intellectual, has to be purified from every touch of the personal self. It will deliberately begin this work of purification. It will consciously and steadfastly set itself to work to purge out of itself everything which strives to take for the personality, and everything which makes it in any sense separate from others. For there is only one way in which the doors that shut the soul out of the temple swing open, and that is by the breaking down of the walls that separate it from its fellows. I want to touch on first about the desire nature and the mixing with the intellectual nature. Our desire nature, or our lower self, or here I would say kama manas or karma, it has a natural progression, an innate movement in itself, and so does our higher nature, our higher manas, the intellectual. It has a natural movement in a certain direction. So when you're able to mix those two, that natural direction of the desire or kama kind of gets pulled in the other direction. So nothing gets negated. And I don't know if we have a quote in here, but nothing gets thrown away. Nothing is discarded. It's just kind of rearranged and made pure. I know that's harmonized so that it can go in the natural or the innate direction of the higher nature.
Yes, which is what Annie Besant meant in the previous slides, harmonizing the lower with the higher. If we just out of the blue we tell a person you have to abandon your desires, that is something that normally a person would think is really harsh and self-denying and why I should do this. But when we start looking at desires, we start looking at the problems that desire brings in general, how we have self-contradictory desires. We want A, but we want also B. And when we get A, B is unhappy. And then we get B and A is unhappy. And then we have contradictory desires with other people. And then when we start understanding the problem of desire, there is this natural harmonization in which this desire starts to fall into its rightful place. There is nothing wrong with likes and dislikes. What is a problem is their compelling nature, their ability to blind our sight. Many times we do something out of desire that then later on in life, when we are not under the domination of that desire, or at some other point, we say, I should not have done that. But at the moment we were blinded and we were pulled into doing this. So part of this, what Annie Besant is saying here is not kill desire, desire is evil. Is this that Michele was talking about? There is a harmonization so that desire can be healthy and go in the right direction. And we will see that the less we worry about ourselves, because we start getting this inner maturity, the happier we are. When a person begins to lose that strong sense of what I want, this sense of what I want is in itself suffering. Is this awareness of a constant lack that I need to get from the environment. So the breaking of that constant need is in itself joyful. Now, all this is really advanced work in a sense. Annie Besant is talking about here souls that are departing from the regular, gradual evolution. So we cannot expect it to be easy or for us to be perfect at this. We shouldn't think it's easy or hard. All we have to do is deal with the present, neither that is easy nor that it is hard. But don't get discouraged if you find that dealing with the desires is, it's not that easy.
I think one of the biggest fallacies for me when I started the path, whatever you want to call it, was that I thought that I shouldn't get angry anymore, or I shouldn't feel this emotion. If I'm working on my spiritual nature and I'm purifying it, then these emotions will go away. But I think the very fact that we have an emotional body means that we're going to have emotions. So the best that we can do at this moment is when strong things enter our field is to notice that emotion, know it's there, and say, okay, it's there, and then move on towards that. I don't think our goal is the absence of emotion. It's more of purifying it. First of it, it's noticing that it's there. Then it's noticing and trying to make that space in it. And then eventually getting to where it's there and we don't even pay attention to it anymore.
Yeah, that's an important point. It's not the absence of, it's freedom from, so that emotions will always be there as long as we are alive. And as Michele says, have an emotional body, emotions are going to be there. And there is nothing wrong with the emotions. The emotions are giving us certain information from the environment. I think we used this example before. If I touch something that is hot, there will be a pain in my hand that is giving me information this is hot. If I don't feel pain, there is a problem there. The idea is that as long as we have an emotional body, the emotions will bring the information from the outside. This person is being aggressive. This situation seems threatening, and there will be fear. All that information is perfectly fine. Now, can we little by little grow into this maturity where we see these things and we are not taken over by this? So that is what Annie Besant means by purifying our nature. And then you may find that there are certain emotions that may not show up any longer at some point, and that is a side effect. But what is important is the freedom, that ability to create the space.
Right. And as Ed says here, this is what the idea is, that the lower nature, the physical sensations, the emotions, and the thoughts are all pointing so they're in the direction to serve the higher. Mm-hmm. He has to gather together experience, and experience has built into faculty and transmuted into power. And he now needs all these powers that he has been gathering during the climb that lies below him, but needs them purified instead of foul. How shall he purify himself? He does not want to destroy. It would be so much easier to destroy. It would need so much less patience to kill some of these qualities he has. But he must perform the harder work of purification. He must keep the essence of all the qualities, while he strikes away from them everything that is personal. And that's the same thing that Theosophy says a lot of time, that it would be easy to take these emotions and not worry about emotions or the thoughts if we remove ourselves from society or remove ourselves from daily life and go off to this nice tranquil beach and live our life. Then we've done that. We've not destroyed them, but we no longer need them, or they're not being stimulated. Well, that's not the ideal either, unfortunately.
Yeah, but this is a very important point, because many times we come into these kind of problems. For example, if there is a situation that triggers a negative emotion in us, an emotion that we don't like. Many times what we try to do is to kill the situation. I'm not going to talk to this person any longer. I'm not going to care about this. I'm not going to. That is like trying to separate ourselves from that. And that is relatively easy. An extreme of this is going into a forest, for example, or killing all desires, all cares for anybody, for anything. That is not that easy, but it's far easier than accepting the emotion, accepting the situation, accepting the person, and seeing how I can work through this so that without killing the person or separating or the emotion, how can I harmonize this? And of course, that is far more difficult than just, be done with something. So this is what Annie Besant, I think there are some quotes later, she says, killing desire, although it is difficult, it is far easier than transforming desire, which is what is needed.
And in the very simple example of having a clean house, I can have a clean house if I shut all the windows, shut off the doors, and move someplace else. Then my house is perfectly clean, but is it functional? So let us take one or two of these qualities in order to see clearly what purification means and how it is to be worked. Let us take the quality that in its lowest stage we know as anger, as wrath, as that tremendous power that the man develops by which he fights his way through the world. Before he has learned to guide and to control it, it is a destructive energy because it is undisciplined, valuable as a force, although destructive in its workings as we see it in the lower world.
And she will talk a little about example. This first example of anger is the anger that is applied to destroying those or the sources of suffering. The first stage of anger is exactly that, in one way or the other, trying to destroy whatever made me uncomfortable or whatever I didn't like, through words, through actions, through financial power, through bullying in one way or the other. So there is this quality of anger that is destructive. And that, at this point in humanity is in most people.
Right. And it has a purpose. It has a very valuable purpose of survival. I know that when I'm angry, I'm more powerful, that most likely I can, if I'm angry, that I can get people to do what I want or do what I need, or, as soon as I yell, my kids clean the house. I know that's going to get done. But that also, in as much as it's useful and purposeful, it also is destructive. So there are better ways to get my house clean. My house was really dirty.
Today all your examples are about that. But this is an important point, because there are things that will make you successful in the world, that will get things accomplished. But these things, which may be good from a material point of view, may be destructive for the spiritual nature. So there are things that can both be effective enough in the world and can be healthy spiritually, and there are things that can be very effective in the world but can be spiritually damaging. So what we are part of the process is to learn how to harmonize these two polarities of our being.
And along with anger, because some people don't get angry, but ambition would be another one.
Or sadness, or jealousy, or whatever it is.
So it has a purpose. Ambition gets us up in the morning, gets us where we need to go to, but too much is not healthy for a spiritual No,
at some point ambition is not required.
Right.
But if you kill ambition, why would you do anything? Unless you came to love or to the compassion or to the sense of duty. Why do you do this for people, for your kids, for this organization? Well, one motivation is ambition, but another motivation is because of love or your sense of duty or helping. That motivation will still get you to do things and is compatible with the spiritual world. The ambition, because it's normally centered on the separate person, is not compatible in that sense.
And the anger too. And we see here probably in the next
let's
one.
Go on.
The anger that a person has in his earlier lives is anger for himself. He is wrathful when he is injured. He strikes back when someone strikes him. And then the next step is, then he learns to purify it from much of the dross and changes that mere brute into a virtue, a very real virtue of noble indignation, of hatred of all that is wrong, base, vile, and cruel. When he sees cruelty, his passion breaks forth against it. And when an injustice is wrought by a tyrant, then he rises up against it in indignation. This destructive energy does good service in the outer world under these many forms.
So this is a first stage of purification, and it also has to do with what makes people angry. For some people, it makes them angry that they couldn't watch their game or that their team lose. And for other people, there may be a far more intellectual, not in the sense of mental, but a more intellectual reason. This is unfair, or this is not right, or this is so.
Would you say a conceptual?
No, intellectual in the sense that it's not mere based on the sensorial or the sensual,
okay.
But it's based on ideas or concepts. You say, this is not right. I cannot stand for this. Even if it is for somebody doing something for you, you may still be reacting personally, but there is this indignation for something that you say is not right, not just because somebody beat you in a game, for example.
Right.
So that is a step towards the purification of anger. But then this, as Annie Besant is going to say, this is still a destructive energy. So there is still a further step to take.
In that way, he used the higher anger to conquer the lower. He used the nobler passion to slay the passion of his lower life. He learned to be no longer angry for himself, but angry only for those whom he desired to help. He has purified it to a great extent from the personal element, but within that calmer atmosphere of the court of the temple, illuminated by the rays of absolute compassion, shining forth from the Holy of Holies, there is no place for anger of any sort, even though the anger be purged from the personal antagonism. Go ahead.
No, in this progression, so she's describing just 3 steps, and there are all the levels in between, but there is a completely personal anger, then the impersonal anger, where one fights for the others, and then there is when there is only compassion. In between these 3 points, there are all kinds of degrees, that we grow into.
Right, and I kind of mind more of a question when what really struck me here is when she talked about, but within the calmer atmosphere of the court of the temple. So to me, that made me think that there is a point that it's not that I've purified my nature so much that there is no anger, but I've purified it enough that now I'm in a place where anger isn't needed. Does that make sense?
Yes. And in specific situations, there may be some action that seems to be angry. We have even in the case of enlightened or divine beings that they display some
frustration,
some kind of anger. Even Jesus, throwing people out of a temple. But the quality of that anger is completely different. It's
less destructive.
It's a superficial anger. It's an anger because that may be the right response. He was giving a message here. If he politely would tell them, please leave the temple because this is not what you should do here, probably the message would not come through. The next day they would be there. So sometimes anger may be appropriate, but then the enlightened being has the complete freedom to so that the right action flows. In most of our cases, we are taken over by anger.
Right. The aspirant has now to learn that those who do the wrong are also his brothers, and that they suffer more in their wrongdoing than do their fellow men by the injury that they may inflict. Noble indignation is not the characteristic of the soul that is striving onwards towards the divine, for the divine life loves all the children, no matter how low the grade of their evolution. The love of the divine that emanated all has nothing outside itself. Within the outer court, the divine must be recognized, no matter how thick are the veils that hide it, for there the eyes of the spirit are to be opened. And I would just mention once again that this is the goal, this is the ideal, because when we're in the midst of something that is violent or is aggressive, having this, oh, we're all brothers, is something that can come up as an ideal, but they're also, because we're so conditioned, that if this anger, this destructive anger comes up, at least having know that this is a process that can be let go of easier, and then the talons of the destructive anger don't have quite a hold on us.
Mm-hmm. Yes, this is something that happens again naturally and gradually as we recognize the unity in our daily life, not when somebody's attacking us in one way or the other, but as we recognize little by little the unity behind everything, as we try to relate to people as if we are relating to their souls, not to their personalities. As we do all this, then that begins to be the state of consciousness in which we live. And then the anger begins to be less prominent because this sense of unity begins to have more room in our consciousness. But this is not something that we can expect it to happen when we are in the middle of an aggression. The key for this transformation is to change our aims of life, to change our perspective of life. For example, if I have a problem with my diet, I eat all trash food. How can I kill the desire for this very unhealthy food? Well, I have to generate a different purpose in life. For example, I may start stimulating a love for sport, for going and walking on a trail, walking in nature, for something healthy. So as my love for that which is higher increases, naturally that counteracts my attachment to the lower. So it's a question of little by little changing our aims, our ideals, where we want to go, what we want from life. And that purifies the desires.
And a diet is a really good example, because we all know how hard it is when somebody says diet or, exercise or something like that. So fortunately, not all our desires are that difficult, but it's the same path. We have these ideals, we get started, we're encouraged, and then we fall back and we get discouraged. The whole idea is just to get up again and keep going forward.
Of course, there are other things more important than simply diet, unless we have a very unhealthy diet. But, most of us don't have an ideal of having a healthy body in this society. So most of us don't have a strong motivation to be healthy. Now, with more awareness about, the problem with food and all this is exactly what is happening. Now, the whole culture is beginning to develop a higher ideal that fights the desire to engage in unhealthy diet.
Right. And as the whole culture begins to have a healthier idea about how to live, it makes it easier for each one of us, because now I can go out and eat vegetarian very easily, where, 20 years ago, it was a salad and that was it. So that idea of helping is there.
Yes. So the same with all desires is little by little changing, raising our ideals, our view of life, of what we want from life, etc.
And knowing that that there are, I mean, we know that the basic unhealthy emotions and the basic unhealthy thoughts are out there, but now we're talking about the subtleties of it. And a lot of us don't even know that there were unhealthy subtleties in there. So we're just learning that, and then on top of it, we're trying to work towards these aims. Therefore, this noble indignation is to be purified until it is purged of everything that is of anger, and is changed into an energy that leaves nothing outside its helpful range. For the saviors of men choose not whom they will serve. That which once was anger has to become, by purification, protection for the weak, impersonal opposition to the strong, evil-doing, perfect justice to all. As the soul is thus striving after purification, it will have certain tests that it will apply to all this process through which it is passing itself. If it find that when doing service, if in testing that action and its motive, it find that the I is subtly mingled with the energy, if it find that it looks less for the success of the working than for the success of the operator, if it find that when it fails in its own working, but sees that work accomplished by another, there is something of disappointment mingling in the cup of its delight at seeing the work achieved, then it knows that the personality is still lingering in it.
So this is all part of self-observation. And the personality will be with us, even into the initiation. So we have to be always on the lookout and see, recognize when the personality gets in the way, and how, yes, this is a service to humanity, but I want to do it. Or this is service for humanity, but I want to be recognized. So all this will always be there, but we have to develop this awareness, because it's the awareness, the one that avoids that unconsciously we get attached to that motion.
And it weakens that fence or that wall of separation. And when when that wall is separated, then we're able to open up to more of what's out there. And if it find that in personal failure there is still a sting of disappointment, if it find that from the failure of its own outgoing energy there comes back to it something of depression, something of discouragement, something that clouds for a moment its peace and serenity, then it realizes that in that sting, in that cloud, there is still a part of personality. In this way, the soul deliberately labors for growth, purifying always the lower nature and unceasing effort, until there is less opposition within itself to the passing through it of the light of the holy ones who become divine. First of all, the first paragraph really talked about kind of humility. It keeps us humble. We know that when we're still bummed out that we did something and we didn't get recognized, that it's still the personality or the lower self, that ambition that's thinking. And then the second part is by doing this work, knowing what our goal is, heading towards the goal, it weakens that veil. That's that wall I was talking about. It weakens that veil and it puts holes in it. And then we can see more of the light, more of that divineness that can come shining through, which will give us more encouragement to keep going and more strength. So It's a nice circle.
Yeah, so this is more or less what we had for today. So basically the first concept is this harmonization of the personal with the spiritual. We will see these are all connected. So how to do it, Annie Besant talks a little here and there. When we come to the end of the webinar, we will see different tools. But the first basic concept that she's giving is this: not to kill, but to mature, to transmute, to transform. And that this transformation of what we can call negativities is associated to a deeper awareness, to a deeper understanding, to like what she says, this compassion doesn't come merely from wishing to be compassionate. It comes from understanding that we are all connected, by understanding that the person that does evil is hurting himself or herself, by understanding that the soul never wants evil, and when the personality does something evil, the soul is suffering for that, the soul of that person. Okay. So all this understanding helps us little by little transmute, in this case, anger or, any other.
Right. Little by little helps us to move forward. Instead of, I guess I would look at it, if I didn't know that the person who's antagonizing me is suffering more, or, or that it's a tide of something that I need to learn, then I stay stuck or I even move backwards. So by realizing all that, even though everything's reacting within me, I'm still moving forward. And that's the whole idea.